Bank of America says Hasbro could fall 34% due to company ruining Magic the Gathering card game. Well, CNBC likes incendiary headlines on their articles. That's what's been popping around today in the community. Everyone talking about how poorly Hasbro is doing, even though they are forcing Magic the Gathering to make more and more and more products. My guest today is Rich Stein, chief hipster and author over at Hipsters of the Coast. Rich took a deep dive into the Bank of America deep dive and has a lot of details to provide us of some stuff that maybe the community is missing. If you give me a second to thank our patrons, I'll be right back with the conversation.
Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat.
Rich Stein, chief hipster and author over at Hipsters of the Coast. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I appreciate you joining us here on the show. I want to jump right into it. CNBC published an article today with the headline, a very incendiary headline. Bank of America says Hasbro could fall 34% due to company ruining Magic the Gathering card game. I think you and I could agree, along with a bunch of our viewers, that something is going on over in the halls of WotC, something that we would prefer not to be happening, but is. But I have to ask you, is Magic ruined?
Is it ruined? No, I don't think it's ruined. I think, this question comes up all the time, right? Is Magic dying? Is Magic dead? Is this going to kill Magic? Is that going to kill Magic? But no, I don't think this is the death of Magic.
So before we move from the CNBC short coverage into the deeper dive that you did, that I think a lot of people are not doing today, just reacting to the headline, do you think that players or collectors have anything to worry about this announcement in particular, that Bank of America's stock forecast for Hasbro is not that great?
Only if they're holding Hasbro stock. Otherwise, I don't think this really affects anyone who's a day-to-day player, fan, even the more engaged players. I don't think this really has any immediate effect on how anyone interacts with the game.
So CNBC's summary said that Bank of America performed a deep dive, and they really pulled a few sentences out of a pretty deep dive, or at least a long article. We'll get into what the contents were on Hasbro's MTG business. But from your exploration, how exactly deep was that dive?
I would not have called it a deep dive. It took a solid look at the secondary market. I will say that. It was definitely a deep dive into the secondary market, looking at sources like TCG Player, eBay pricing and things like that. But it did start to stretch into other things, like physical box resales and sealed product, and it left some glaring holes out. I thought there was no mention of Arena, which I at the top of my article, I was really, really surprised to see no mention of Arena, since it's such a huge investment. Anytime, before Chris Cox moved over to being the president of Hasbro, when he was still running Wizards, the digital game space was such a huge thing. He was brought over from Microsoft specifically because of his proven track record in digital spaces. And so to leave Arena out of any forecast for Hasbro and Magic the Gathering seemed like a real big omission. Even just to say that he didn't think that that they didn't think Arena would be important.
Right. It would be contributing large amounts of value, one would think, to the entirety of the IP, which is, self-professed. Hasbro is leaning on Wizards of the Coast, the Magic the Gathering IP, very heavily right now to prop up any profits that they're making at all. So that aside, the digital piece aside, they did mention the secondary market, and I know our viewers in particular are going to be really interesting in what you found there when it comes to the print runs that they explored and the stock that they investigated. I'll put investigated in air quotes and let you explain that, at physical retailers like Target.
Yeah, so the retail, the national retailer space is hugely important, and anytime we talk about the health of the game, is Magic dying, I think it is really valuable to look at what's going on at Target, what's going on at Walmart, what's going on at Amazon. Wizards really doubled down on this idea of moving product through those spaces, and I think when we talk about things the community is legitimately concerned about. The health of our local gaming stores is directly impacted by these sorts of things. And so this report, definitely on the first page, and I think CNBC and some of the other outlets picked up on this, the report definitely does call into concern the health of the retail segment of the industry. But then in the actual report, they mention visiting 2 Target stores. And that's really the extent of the research into what's happening at the retail space.
And not only, it wasn't just 2 random Target stores. You found, or you estimate at the very least, that it's the 2 Target stores closest to their offices within walking distance, and one is basically a Target grocery store that are very common in larger cities where square footage for retail space is at a premium. For these brands to come in and just open up sort of a, this is all we're going to do at this location, which is groceries in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Big shout out to Travis Norman, who's another writer over at Hipsters. The whole team this morning was looking at this report, trying to make sense of what was going on social media and what was going on in the report. And Travis was the one who looked it up and actually found out that those 2 locations were right by the headquarters, the corporate headquarters. And then I think on Twitter, I think it was Jay and Nelly who pointed out on Twitter that Target's retail model, there as a corporate entity, Target is even the company stocking those shelves. They're outsourcing those stocking decisions to another company. So again, when you think like deep dive into the business of Magic the Gathering, this is a huge segment of that business, and I think really important to the players, way more important to the players than the stock price. And so to not really to scratch the surface of what's going on there was kind of disappointing. Yeah.
And misrepresentation in some cases. I reviewed some of the graphs that were in the report and some of the things that you said about them. They were sort of drawing conclusions that if you took 1 extra second to review why some of the graphs look the way they did, it wasn't exactly a good faith argument for their point.
Yeah, I think so. And I think for you and me, I think any even casual player, when we think about getting Magic cards, you think about a booster box, right? It's the easiest thing to buy. You go to the store, you get a booster box, you go home, you crack some packs with your friends, or you have a draft, you invite some friends over. Like that is just like, to me, like the fundamental entry into a new set. And so what the report looked at was the value of the box on TCG Player. So you can look at the price history on TCG Player for a sealed box, and it's a pretty good metric of what the set is worth because, it's the retailers are all setting their prices, but the graphs being looked at and the price drops being quoted in these articles was looking back at pre-release pricing. And so that initial price, so like if a set, so for example, Neon Dynasty became available to purchase in February, but the pre-order price was being included. And every set that has ever released, I feel fairly confident, it's probably not every, but most sets, the very first few boxes that list for pre-order when the set's announced, or like the first day it goes on retail at one of these sites, it's always astronomical.
It's the same thing with singles. We always tell our viewers, wait, don't buy singles right now, especially in pre-release. After the set starts getting open, if you can't wait, go ahead and get it. Probably best 6 to 8 weeks after, but that's just our take. But yeah, it can't be, those pre-release prices can't be viewed as an all-time high for a card or for a sealed product.
Right. And then when I dove in, and if you look at set box price, so the report also only cited collector's booster boxes. They didn't look at set boosters boxes, which if you dive into those numbers, they paint a very different picture about the long-term value of products. And when you think about it, collectors versus players, it's entirely possible, and I think very interesting if you look at the long-term value of the collector box versus the set box, because maybe collectors are only interested in getting things early on, and then collectors have picked up what they want. Whereas if a set is really fun to play, like I think a lot of people really enjoyed drafting Neon Dynasty, a set that's a lot of fun to play will retain its box value. The set box value, the draft boosters, will retain their value for much longer than the collector boosters. And so the report also makes a claim about the growth of the player base, which I think if you look at the set boosters might give you a better idea of how the player base is growing. But it didn't look at that. It very much looked at just the collector's boosters, which are very much an investor product. They're priced higher than the set boosters, specifically because the packs are, I mean, everyone knows they're full of foils. So, it's very, it was, it's hard to characterize it as misleading. But, it was definitely looking at a very specific segment of the community and a very specific set of products to base this, this idea that Magic was ruined on.
No, yeah, I completely agree. They went further too to compare it to the growth of other games using a graph that compared Google search trends of Pokemon specifically. There was a few others, but Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, and there were giant spikes on Pokemon that coincided with the release of the video games, one of the most popular video games in the world. They were comparing that to the popularity of Magic the Gathering at any point on Google searches, which just can't ever equate.
Yeah, that part to me, throughout the whole report, I was really reading and the team over at Hipsters were trying to understand what the report is really trying to get at, this investor versus player idea. But then when I got to that graph that was showing Pokemon versus Magic, and the idea that the popularity of Pokemon would siphon Magic players over to the Pokemon TCG, it's, I don't want to say it's a laughable thought, because I've played the Pokemon TCG. It's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, that is a fun game, but to think that it's going to siphon off Magic players is just really shows a disconnect with, how the games are played and enjoyed by the communities. And just really shows, I think, that the report was focused on a very small concept of investing in sealed product and investing in singles, and then just made some really weird conclusions. And if you go to Google Trends, Google's not dumb. Google knows the difference between Pokemon the brand and Pokemon the card game.
Sure.
And they have a pretty good idea. And if you look at the trends between Magic the Gathering, the card game, and Pokemon the card game, there's no comparison. Magic has always been more popular than the Pokemon card game, and they trend pretty consistently against each other.
I think the big point that they sort of either didn't get to or didn't know to acknowledge, or have, seen the cycle of set releases over the last 2 years and what Wizards has been doing, they have made their reprint model with this base copy, foil etch, showcase, scratch and sniff, all the way up, neon ink. Everything has layers now, each individual card. So with those layers, it drives down the bottom copy, the base level non-foil as a Magic card looks copy. And so it results in a lower barrier of entry monetarily for the average player, while the collectors still get their pieces. Look at Brothers War with our numbered, special rainbow foil cards. And so as we look at this, the consumer confidence dip, I think, is part of this, but I just don't feel like, from what I read and from what I read of your analysis of it too, that consumer confidence dip, they didn't really identify it accurately. I don't think it's reprints in the game. I don't think it's $1,000 packs. I think these are easy tent poles to point to and say this is what's ruining the game. But I think it's sort of a slower burn than that. I think it's more of, product fatigue, which is very real. We've gone from 3, 4, 5 commander decks a year all at once as a celebrated major release to there's 2 to 5 in every single set that comes out, and no one can ever keep up. We literally have a video series on our channel called Cards You Missed, and that's where we look back at the commander product while we're already in previews for the next set. We just have to do it on that schedule at this point. And then you also combine that with something that I don't think gets enough attention compared to $1,000 packs or reprinting cards 100 times, is the fact that we've got these sets now where we can't do masters, we can't do double masters, we can't do that every year because they will run out of cards to reprint and the hype will stay low. They've got these Horizon sets that are forcing players to purchase new cards for formats whose, meta games aren't meant to shift as catastrophically as they have every year or two recently. And so all of that to say that, do you think that is the major point that they missed? Or do what is your opinion of the current state of the game And is there any good info to be gleaned from this report?
I think there is some good info to be gleaned from the report. The product fatigue is real. And at Hipsters, we've written about it numerous times over the years. Zach Barish has written several articles on burnout. We have a new writer who came on, Luca, a couple weeks ago, who wrote about burnout right in between preview season changeover. It is absolutely a real issue. Wizards has definitely taken a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks mentality to product releases. I think this gets back to what you said at the top here, which was like, there's definitely something going on inside Wizards that we're all very concerned about. And I think the product fatigue is the most obvious manifestation of that problem, which is that there is so much going on and cards get missed and products get released that you like, even for us. And I mean, like, I run a content site and there's products that even I'm like, wow, that came out this week. Like, really? Miss? Like, how did I miss that?
The Transformers cards were the most recent example for me, where it was 3 weeks since them coming out to me actually covering them, and that was in a 1 minute piece of content. So it is quite a lot.
But I do think there's good news to be gleaned from the report, and that is this: if you are someone who believes, like you just said, that barrier of entry, that financial barrier of entry to the game needs to be lower. If you think that the entry-level products, the ability for anyone in the world to just enter a local game store and join this community, if you think that financial barrier needs to be lower, then I think this report is good for you, because I think what this report is trying to say is that barrier is getting too low, that it's too easy to get cards, that the price of boxes over time is coming down, that the price of singles is coming down. If, looking even at the reserve list price, the report calls out that the reserve list price, and this is information they source from MTG Goldfish, who tracks the overall health of the reserve list. But even that is coming down. And so the report is making the argument that is a bad thing for the health of the game. This is not a new argument. I think people have heard this argument for years now. I first wrote about it at Hipsters back in 2015. This idea that the secondary market value of cards was healthy for a collectible product. And the author of the report definitely agrees with that and feels that Wizards, they don't say Wizards needs to make fewer products. They actually say that Wizards needs to just print less of the products they're making, which I think is, something I definitely disagree with. But I think for anyone who believes that Wizards needs to make the game more affordable at that base level that you called out, that base level of cards where there's no foils, there's no etchings, there's no fancy serial numbers or anything, just the base level, get me in the door so I can build a deck and play with my friends, then that is good news, because this report definitely thinks that barrier is getting too low.
The report seems to lean on an older idea, I think, of hashtag MTG Finance, which is buy 20 copies of a card you think is going to pop and go do that. Lately, that has not seemed like the approach that Wizards is providing for collectors. The main approach being exclusivity. We're going to make 100 copies of these, and good luck. Whoever buys them buys them. We're not even, look at the countdown kit from Secret Lair just a week ago. It absolutely flew off the shelves, but it turned out that maybe that was their intention all along.
Yeah, exactly. And those the heyday of those speculative purchases, I think that's long gone.
Absolutely, it is.
And there's definitely some investors who hold on to it. And the pandemic, gosh, like, if there's anything that's completely out of Wizards' control, right, it's the pandemic. And so whether or not people's behaviors are going to change again as we get back to conventions and Friday Night Magic pick up speed again, like, that's the one thing that Wizards and none of us are going to be able to predict is the pandemic. But like, yeah, the idea of creating these collectors products, these high-end things, a lot of like the M30 backlash, the 30th anniversary edition backlash feels so familiar from when, like, From the Vault first hit shelves, right? That was a product that also was like, I remember it was like 2 per store. Like, every game got 2 or 4 copies of this thing.
I compared it to Phyrexian Negator being printed into that dual deck, and people thinking that was the end of the reserve list.
Exactly. So there's always been this, Wizards has constantly pushed and push the limits here. And obviously M30 takes a huge leap off of a cliff when it comes to pushing that envelope. But it's clear that, this is the direction Wizards is going in. They're pushing the boundary in both directions. They want to make more high-end limited products for collectors. These serial numbered to 500 cards, I'm surprised we haven't seen more coverage of that through the community, because that to me crosses a line that reminds me of what was that promo from there was a
Viscera Seer.
Yeah, and or even going back further, there was a Dragon promo that was exclusive to one convention.
Yeah,
way back,
way back early on. Zeralian of the Claw, is that it?
Maybe. But anyways, it was only available at one convention, and people were terrified because sports cards were collapsing, comic book prices were collapsing, and the idea that there would only ever be a limited number of these things, you can only get them one time. And so this idea of there's 500 copies of this Wormcoil engine and that's it. That's all there's ever going to be. To me, that's this is your moment for collectors to get these things. And at the same time, they pushed the bottom end or entry level, they push that down. So yeah, when you look at, if you cherry pick your statistics, right, which is anyone who does statistics is going to tell you that if you cherry pick your statistics, you can tell any story you want.
Right.
And so this report definitely cherry picked its statistics, looking at the long-term value of a collector's set booster box. And that doesn't tell the whole story. The product that moves on the shelves at Target doesn't tell the whole story. There's so many products. And again, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because there's so many products, which means there's something for everyone. But we're a community that's used to following everything. And so it's very difficult transition to make. And that's where Wizards really needs to address the issue, is finding that balance between making these collectors products and also making the bottom line lower. And the Transformers thing is interesting to bring up because, the Worlds Beyond stuff is another one of these products that just gets shoved into the release schedule and contributes to this burnout. But when it gets included as an extra set inside of a standard set, that's an interesting change to me and something new, right? So this set, Brothers War, has Brothers War the set, which is, the new standard legal set.
Right.
And then it also has this 63 card sheet of these retro artifacts.
Yeah, sort of mystical archive-ish.
Exactly, right? That's the Mystical Archive Expeditions,
right,
sheet, essentially. And then, in addition, there's this Worlds Beyond product. So that almost they're trying to see, okay, well, what if we have all these different products and we just release it all at the same time? But instead of making it different products, just make it one thing. It's just Brothers War. And so, again, it's clear that they're just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And I think we're still in this phase where Hasbro is just investing in more product development, more product research. How many different ways can we cross-brand with other IPs? And they're definitely throwing a lot at the community, and it's gonna have to slow down at some point. If it doesn't slow down at some point, people are going to take a break. They're going to take a break from Magic. That's absolutely what's going to happen. That's no secret, and that's when it'll be interesting to see what the retail sales are like, especially as we head into the holidays. So maybe next year will be the year they tone it down.
That's unlikely to me because most of these decisions are on 2-year rotating schedules. Right. And so this is, I think we are at, not quite to the peak of this. I mean, we have a set coming up towards the middle of next year that is an epilogue set. What is that? We don't even know. Now we're getting extra sets to the set releases. What's happening? We already told you we didn't like double feature. Hopefully it's not like that. We'll see what Dominaria Remastered is. I mean, you already got in everybody's good graces by saying it's going to have a Force of Will reprint, but we haven't heard anything else about that. Why does that set need to exist? I do hope they answer these questions going forward, but overall, when I saw this incendiary, absolutely over-the-top headline today, I was like, this is not going to translate well outside of anyone who knows what they're truly talking about, because they're going to read that and they're going to go, oh, Hasbro has killed Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is officially dead.
Yeah, it's an easy bandwagon to jump on, and it definitely hit all of the highlights. Magic, the 30th anniversary edition's too expensive, product fatigue is real, too many cards are being put into the marketplace. All real concerns, but then not a lot of, meat behind them.
Right. The conclusions drawn were a little strange.
Yeah, absolutely. So not the end of Magic, not by a long shot, but Wizards definitely needs to take these concerns seriously that the community has over fatigue.
Yeah, I think we've moved from there's too many products as a meme into it's now a reality, please fix this.
Yeah, because it's just going to spawn more of these, right? Because more financial advisors, more mainstream media outlets are going to see these kinds of headlines. They're going to see the traction that it picks up, and they're going to think to themselves, wow, maybe there really is something going on at Hasbro that we need to pick up on that is going to actually be the death of the game. And someone is going to do the work and really look into the retail sales at Targets and Walmarts across the country, especially as we go into holiday season, especially as Hasbro continues to have to fight with Mattel for market share in the rest of their segments. And as the pandemic comes to an end, a lot of these companies, Magic is no exception. A lot of these gaming companies had tremendous growth during the pandemic because a lot of people were forced indoors and they found refuge in games like Magic. And so how companies transition out of the pandemic is going to be a huge test for them. And this kind of product fatigue, it's once people don't have to just stay inside and play games, I think it's really going to test the limits of what Wizards can push on the community.
Well, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of people who watch our channel, Magic will outlast Wizards of the Coast. Magic will outlast Hasbro. It's just, are we going to have a good relationship with the company that makes it going forward, or are we not? Yeah,
I think that comes down to, the last question I asked at the end of my article, which was, who does Magic care more about, the investors or the players? And I think if Wizards can show that they care more about the players, then I think they can really, build that relationship with the community.
Rich Stein, Chief Hipster over at Hipsters of the Coast. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Big thanks again to Rich over at Hipsters of the Coast for joining me today. Make sure you go follow them on Twitter. Lots of good articles and content over there. And now we throw the question to you. What do you make of all this? Is there anything to be made of it? Are we just going to play Commander at our kitchen tables with cards that we printed off anyway? Let us know down in the comments. We'll talk to you there.